U.S. President Donald Trump criticized the legislation signed by President Joe Biden aimed at expanding access to high-speed internet, calling it racist and unconstitutional. I've spoken with my wonderful Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutkin, and we agreed that the Biden-Harris so-called Digital Equity Act is totally unconstitutional, Trump wrote on Truth Social. The legislation, which is part of Biden's broader infrastructure plan, is designed to improve internet access for various groups, including veterans, seniors, people with disabilities, and those in rural communities. However, Trump took particular issue with provisions that aim to enhance internet access for racial and ethnic minorities. He continued, "No more woke handouts based on race. The Digital Equity Program is a racist and illegal $2.5 billion giveaway. I am ending this immediately and saving taxpayers billions of dollars." The law seeks to improve internet access. So the idea that he's saving taxpayers dollars, yes, he's saving them dollars, but they're giving up a service. So, you know, it's not in a vacuum. The law seeks to improve internet access in underserved areas. Despite Trump's claims, the New York Times reported that the legislation doesn't specifically prioritize race, only stating that the program could assist racial minorities. It also includes a non-discrimination clause inspired by the 1964 Civil Rights Act that ensures individuals cannot be excluded from the program based on their race, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. What is the Digital Equity Act? The Digital Equity Act allocates $60 million in grants to states and territories to develop plans for equitable internet access and $2.5 billion to help implement those plans. Some funds have already been distributed to conservative rural states like Indiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Iowa, and Kansas. Additional funding, approved during the final days of the Biden administration, has yet to be dispersed. The initiative is overseen by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration and the Department of Commerce. If Trump moves to cancel the funding, it would likely face significant legal challenges. The Trump administration had some success temporarily halting grants for programs focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in March, a federal appeals court upheld a lower court's decision to block a freeze on funding for states, noting that the freeze could harm those reliant on the federal assistance. Internet swiftly react The internet swiftly reacted to Trump's comment. A user said, "Another gift for Elon. Starlink is one of the options in rural areas. By defunding broadband access, it gives Starlink a competitive advantage since its speeds will not be impacted oligarchy and kleptocracy." That's a very good point here. This is a huge conflict of interest that if it existed during the Biden administration or during a theoretical or hypothetical Harris administration, that the conservatives and Elon and Trump and all those gaggle of idiots would lose their minds. But when it's Elon, when it's Daddy Trump, we don't really care because they don't care about that because they don't actually care about this type of corruption or like wealth inequality or any of those issues. They don't actually care about them. They think it's fine. They think it's like a virtue. They think it's just sort of a perk of being powerful, right? You earned your position, to become a senator or whatever, and that whatever cynical, Elon earned his position to be. He wouldn't have been picked to be the Doge guy unless he was so smart and so successful. Another noted, he's canceling a program for mostly white rural Republicans because it had the word equity in the name. That's actually that's probably true. They probably just went equity bad because they're starting to see who he is, so he's got to strangle their access to information. Claimed a user. Okay, that's a little bit far-fetched. The idea that let Elon. So wait, Elon sees the backlash and as a result wants to cut people's access to internet. That's really far-fetched. It's one of those like haha cynical social media comments, but it's really just, if we're going to take it seriously, it's silly. A user explained, "Trump can't have his base supporters having too much access to information that might conflict with what they hear on conservative talk radio and entertainment news." Meanwhile, another user added, "I work in telecom with Trump idolizers. I saw this being said once before and they thought nothing of it. Our company in particular relies on new builds and specifically for areas that would benefit from this. They are and I will be affected by what they voted for. Pay for this is simple. The play for this is simple. It all leads back to Elon and Starlink. The funding for this will be diverted to Starlink for a subpar service that is more expensive and less reliable. Yeah, I yeah, I they're gonna defund our plan to expand and improve broadband and then point at broadband and be like, "Oh, look at how bad it is, man. Look at how bad it is." And then, use that as a pretext to do some sort of corrupt thing with Elon um, and Starlink. That seems entirely plausible to me. It's one of those conspiracies where I would call it a light conspiracy theory, but with this administration, I think it is not even a conspiracy theory. I think it is a totally reasonable thing to assume based on what this administration has done thus far. President Trump ripped former President Biden's high speed internet program Thursday, vowing to end what he called a racist and illegal initiative. All right, let's pause for a second. I'm going to talk about the white Afrikaans refugees from South Africa here a little bit later in the show. And so it's just so like my understanding of that situation is that it is a somewhat overtly racist one, and that the idea that he's going to call this program to expand broadband and access to internet in rural areas racist and illegal at the same time he, is doing the refugee thing with the white Afrikaans from South Africa or whatever. Um, it's just so it's beyond cynical. It's just so like nothing matters anymore. Nobody cares. Like especially conservatives and Republicans. They seem to just not care about anything anymore. Trump said he spoke with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick about the Biden-era Digital Equity Act, which allocated about $2.75 billion for programs that provide technology, including the internet and skills for all Americans. We, Trump and Lutnick, agree that the Biden and Harris so-called Digital Equity Act is totally unconstitutional, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post Thursday. No more woke handouts based on race. The Digital Equity Program is a racist and illegal $2.5 billion giveaway. I am ending this immediately and saving taxpayers billions of dollars. Biden signed the Digital Equity Act into law in 2021 as part of a $1 trillion infrastructure package to further the former administration's Internet for All initiative. Interesting, I guess a funny note here is that just think about how Trump ran on infrastructure for a while there, especially during his first term. But he also ran partially on his second term and was unable to, and will likely be for this term, be unable to actually pass any infrastructure legislation. But then Biden was able to get a full $1 trillion large scale infrastructure bill through. Um, the contrast is stark. It set aside about $60 million for grants to states and territories to come up with ways to improve access to technology, along with another $2.5 billion to implement the plans. The Trump administration has worked to roll back several diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The Internet for All program was intended to apply to a variety of groups. Senator Patty Murray, the original author of the Digital Equity Act, swiped back at Trump's post, writing in a statement, "As usual, the president has no idea what he's talking about. I wrote the Digital Equity Act to help close the digital divide in America. It's about making sure seniors can get online and equipping every student in every classroom with the tools they need to succeed, whether that's a hotspot to take home or a laptop," Murray wrote. My law, I think something that older people might not understand. I think most probably do at this point, but like you need access to the internet in 2025 to be a functioning member of 21st century society in America. You need access to internet. You need consistent, regular access to internet. And I would go even a step further and say, not only do you really need a cell phone. You can kind of get away with a home phone. You at bare minimum need a phone number, and the cell phone I would almost say is a necessity as well. It makes it a million times easier than having a home line. Um, so, and I think maybe a lot of older people can glibly dismiss that and be like, "Oh, I didn't have a phone growing up. I didn't have a laptop. Why do these kids need it? I did just fine without it." But like, this is not 1970. We don't live in the same world. All job Nobody does physical job applications anymore, right? If you want to apply for a job, it has to be online, right? If you're going to find a job, it has to be online. Nobody does physical job postings anymore anywhere. How are you possibly going to physically go find a job posting? You got to go online to find that shit. You got to do everything online. So it makes sense to me. It's more of a necessity. It's more of a necessity in the sense that it's a utility rather than a service. My law provides maximal flexibility to cities, states, and tribes so every local community can decide for themselves how they invest digital equity dollars. That's why it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, she continued. The grants were appropriated through Congress, and their potential cancellation is likely to face legal challenges. Murray argued Trump would be stealing from the American people should he refuse to spend the appropriated funding. It is absolutely insane that resources meant to help red and blue communities, everyone from local school districts and libraries to workforce training programs and tribes, close the digital divide. Close the digital divide will be illegally blocked because the president doesn't like the word equity, Murray continued.